Roar like a lion. Like a lion. Roar.
Okay. Darren Roar.
Yeah.
Give me the microphone. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So today we have a pretty interesting presentation. We'll be doing a proactive approach in the dark web or towards cybersecurity.
Well, cybersecurity in general.
All right. So here is Darren Roar. He'll be doing our presentation today. I'm glad to see many faces here. I think we have a couple new faces. So show of hands, how many people was it their first time coming to the cyber warfare range? Oh yeah. Get away. You don't belong here. Why are you still coming? So without further ado, here's Darren Roar.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you get something out of this presentation today. Spent a little time putting it together. But as David mentioned, my name is Darren Roar. I am the analyst team lead at IntelliSpire, and today I'm talking to you about a proactive approach to cybersecurity. So before we get started, I'm going to give you a little background on myself so you understand the context that I'll be putting everything in and the analogies that I make. I spent 4 years in the United States Marine Corps as a Special Operations Reconnaissance Marine. Okay, it doesn't apply all that much right now, but you'll see how it ties in later. So on our last deployment to Iraq, we had Operation Dan, otherwise known as Defeat Al-Qaeda North. Okay, and our main task was to either capture or kill the terrorists that were residing there, somewhere in there at some point. So I said mention parallels. So the first parallel I want to make today for all of you is that of terrorists to malicious hackers. Now, I'm not going to say hackers. I might at some time in the presentation. Please understand I mean malicious hackers because, of course, we know hacking is a very innovative, adaptive, and creative thing. It's actually something I hold in high regard, but, of course, it can be very destructive. Many of you probably hackers yourselves in some sense or another. So this operation required a lot of intelligence. We got on the ground, we didn't have too much, and it was basically, look, go find them. All right? So how this ties in is that, when we look at another parallel to keep you in context is our area of operation here was everything east of Lake Tartar and north of Baghdad. Now, for a 100-man contingent, that's a very, very large area of operation. So when we look at hackers and where they reside, we're looking at the ClearNet. We look at the DarkNet. We're looking at I2P, the FreeNet, numerous different platforms. Regardless of the amount of manpower that we have, it is a very, very broad spectrum to cover, especially with the limited resources. So going in, what we knew about the terrorists was we knew where they were, right? They're in Iraq. We knew how they had been doing things. We knew what they had done and how they had done it. The problem was we didn't know when they were going to do it next. We didn't know when and in what way. So we knew that, for instance, their primary weapon was IEDs. We knew this in the same way that for the most part we know that hackers are going to use malware of some sort to exploit whatever system it is that they're attacking. Once again, it's very, very hard to defend something if we don't know when or where they're coming from. So it wasn't a matter of necessarily being capable of defending or capable of doing our job. That wasn't the case. With such a very, very large and open battlefield, again, it came down to intelligence and intelligence collection. And there, it was very hard with the limited resources we had to begin with. So since we're talking about warfare, let's talk about the cyber war and cybersecurity. And here's my transition into it. So first of all, let's go through offense versus defense. Typically, warfare, you have both. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's a real war. It doesn't matter if it's a cyber war, which we are in right now. Most of you know this working in the jobs that you're working in. But offense versus defense, security is more of a defensive posture, right? So when we look at it, we are always in a reactive position, right? Security, we sit, we say, okay, we have our system set up, and we are waiting to be attacked. Hopefully, we planned our defenses accordingly. So we sit there, we wait, then boom, the hackers attack, and we react. Now, Most of the time, they only attack when they know that they're going to be successful. Pretty smart, right? Problem is that then we put the patch out, fix it, fix our systems, and defend against that same type of attack for the future, or where we can apply it across the board. However, this is a sequential game, okay? You go, I go. Attack, defend, attack, defend. It's reactive. Cybersecurity, for the most part right now, is reactive. And this is a problem, especially for those of you on the ground or in the field, as we say. So, what I want to talk about is proactive, right? And simultaneous when we look at games or warfare. Okay, so in a simultaneous game, what's happening is you think, all right, well, sequentially, you go, I go. But in a simultaneous scenario, what's happening is while you're planning to go, I'm thinking 2 steps ahead, right? Sequentially, if I was reactive, I'm always going to be 1 step behind. In a simultaneous scenario, I'm thinking 2 steps ahead. That's how I prevent you from attacking. Because if I know when or where you're coming, I can allocate my assets accordingly. If I don't, it's going to be very, very hard to do so. So, always 2 steps ahead allows us to get ahead. This requires a considerable amount of contingency planning and strategizing, right? Something we don't always think about in security. Yeah, what if scenarios? You know, what if this happened? What if that happens? And we build our systems accordingly. But let me give you another example relating back to the war in Iraq. Talking about the primary weapon for terrorists was IEDs at the time, right? Improvised explosive devices, for you who don't know what that means. And there were numerous different types. We had remote deaded, we had pressure plated, we had ESPs, we had command deaded, we had all these different types of IEDs. We went in, and right off the bat, they were destroying us. So U.S. forces said, look, we need to do something about this. And we need to do something about it now. So they spent millions and millions of dollars, and they came out with MRAPs and Cougars and all these other up-armored vehicles to defend against these IEDs. So the terrorists or Al-Qaeda or whoever you want to call them on the other hand said, okay, well, you did this, so now what we're going to do is we're going to make bigger IEDs. So they made bigger IEDs. Right? And then we turned around and we put more armor on the vehicles. They said, okay, that's fine. Well, let's watch what they're doing. And in response, they realized that every time that we were hit with one, the guys would offload off the vehicles and post up a security perimeter. So what they started doing was they started laying smaller IEDs or mines outside of the bigger ones. We still kept getting hit time and time again. So we said, okay, we'll stay inside the vehicles. We stayed inside the vehicles. And then they started making EFPs. An explosively formed projectile, which would punch through the armor no matter how much we put on there. Once again, this came down to a sequential game until our intelligence started saying, okay, rather than being reactive, we need to be proactive. So we utilized technology, drones, air, whatever assets we had. So we caught them in the act while they were doing it real time. We said, look, they're implementing them right now. We have to stop them. Rather than react to them afterwards or try and take a position where, hey, we need to do something about it since it already happened. We need to do something about it before it happens. Think about this and put it in context with cybersecurity. Think about what you're defending and then what happens when you don't know what's coming. It's always reactive. So, going on, everyone's heard the saying, knowledge is power, right? But more specifically, it's all about situational awareness, knowing what we can do with that knowledge and where to apply it. That's what's important, right? Because sure, we know there are attackers out there. We know they're going to attack us, right? We don't know when. We don't know how. We don't know at what point, but we know they're coming. However, if we had those specific details, how much more proficient will we be at our own jobs? That's the question you have to ask. So when we think about it, you go through who, what, where, when, how, and why. So you say, if you know who they're targeting, right? If you know what they're targeting, how they're targeting it, why they're targeting it, when they plan on hitting it. If you ask these questions, then we start looking at, okay, now we can more aptly defend whatever it is that we're trying to defend. So moving forward, I want to give you a few examples. Most of you have probably seen these working in the cybersecurity field. Top 10 breaches in the last few years, financially speaking, and of course these are estimates or ballpark estimates of what they are. But I'm going to run through them, and I'll tell you why later. Epsilon, okay, marketing company. When they were breached, it cost them $4 billion to rectify this breach. $4 billion, right? The Veterans Administration, right? Unencrypted computer, unencrypted hard drive. Somewhere between $100 and $500 million that it cost them. Probably more likely on the latter side. Hannaford Bros, the supermarket chain, $252 million. Sony PlayStation, for you gamers, network was breached. $171 million. The first time that Sony was breached because they didn't learn from the first attack. Target, $162 million. Black Friday is coming up, right? Well, Target got hit, I believe, 2013. $162 million because their card readers were compromised. TJ Maxx, the clothing retailer, $162 million. Heartland Payment Systems, $140 million. You guys get the point. Across the board, these are all different industries, all of which one of you is probably involved with at some point or another or will be in the future. Right? It's not just one industry alone. Anthem was health insurance, $100 million. Sony Pictures again. And this time, when they were breached, whatever personal vendetta the hackers had against Sony, they wiped their entire system, cleaned everything out of it, left them hanging. And then Home Depot, $56 million. I think I was a part of that one as well. I'm not sure how many accounts they have for me saying, look, we'll give you free ID protection or whatever it is now because they've been breached so many times. But these are general ballpark estimates. And if you look at it, what they're not including in here is the aftermath that it had. So if you look at, for instance, all these companies and you say customer retention, right? Customer retention. In business, customer retention is just as important, if not more important, than customer acquisition. So while this was the initial amount that it cost them, how many customers did they lose? And how much money are they continuing to lose because they lost those customers? Because that amount is not factored in right now. So the reason that I present all this is because every single one of these breaches could have been prevented had they known the attack was coming. And in the best case scenario, yes, absolutely presented, but worst case scenario, at least the damage lessened. At least it lessened, had they have known. So let's talk about Dire Banking Trojan, 2015. I know it's a year ago, okay, but there have been plenty of examples since, and this one is a great example. Vulnerability CVE 20150057 for remote code execution. There was no known exploit for this. As most of you know, these CVEs are released about once a month from various companies. Okay, here's the vulnerability. We don't know if there's an exploit. It's really a race for us to fix a patch and for hackers to exploit it. So, released February 2015. 2 months later, exploit was found on the dark web for 48 Bitcoin, somewhere around $10,000. Right? This was not, there was no public or commercial knowledge of this exploit. So this was not known to everyone, but it was there. Okay, it was there on the dark web. Now, from the time that was released on the dark web, there was 60 days, right? 2 month gap. 2 month gap before FireEye found the found the exploit on banking malware. Now, 2 months that they could have had they have known. So let me give you some numbers. IBM X-Force Research estimated that the average cost of each breached account in 2015 was $215. $215 per account. Okay, it doesn't seem like much until you run the numbers and you see that there were over 20 million accounts breached in 2015 alone. Do the math. Okay, it's around $4 trillion. Now, Dire Banking Trojan wasn't responsible for all of those, but around 24% they were, which again puts the cost estimate at about $1 trillion that it cost the financial industry. $1 trillion. Had they have known 60 days prior, you tell me, could we have done something with that? Could we have properly prepared defenses with 60 days for a simple banking Trojan? So, moving on. Sure, you've all heard about Mirai, right? Hopefully, yes. If not, we'll go over it anyways. I chose this one because it was big as of late. Everybody kind of got on the map with this. I hope you like the background picture too. I've set that up just for you. Anyhow, I'm going to walk you through the timeline. 21 September of this year, 21 September, okay, there was an attack with Mirai in a distributed denial of service fashion. Okay, that was on the Krebs on Security blog and OVH, the French internet service and hosting provider. Now, a week later, on 30 September, Anna Senpai, who I had no idea who that is, whether it's a he or she, still don't know, but I had no idea who that was at the time, okay, until this happened, which is typically the case. We have no idea until something happens. But Anna Senpai on 30 September leaks the Mirai code on one of the online forums, okay, and by online right now I mean darknet forums. So the next day on October 1st, he or she claims responsibility for the attack. Hey, I did this and it works, and here's the source code for it. Do what you want. Do what you want with it. 3 weeks later, okay, 21 October, 3 weeks. Remember, Dyer, 60 days. Mirai, 3 weeks. So 3 weeks later, on October 21st, there's the attack on DIN, the cloud-based internet performance and management company. This was claimed by Anonymous and New World Hackers. Most of you know who Anonymous is. I had not heard of New World Hackers. Maybe some of you had, but they're on the map now because of this. And everyone knows that Mirai took over a number of Internet of Things devices and effectively shut down portions of the Internet multiple times. Huge deal. So once again, I'm going to reiterate, knowing when, where, and how they're going to attack is extremely important, because had we had known this, could we have prevented it? Could we have prevented it? So again, here's my question for you. How does it feel as cybersecurity professionals, as the ones who are in charge of defending? How does it feel not knowing where the attack's coming from, what you're supposed to defend, with the resources you have and your area of operation? How does it feel not knowing what's coming or when it's coming? You tell me how effective you can be at your own jobs if you don't know, if you are constantly in a reactive posture, reacting to whatever they want to do. They're the ones controlling the game right now. So, moving on. I would like you all to put yourselves in the mindset of if I were a hacker. And some of you probably already are, if not all of you. Great. Thank you, David. Again, this is knowing my audience. I was asked, they said, who's going to be in the audience, is what I asked my boss. And she told me, there'll be a lot of technical guys, maybe some hackers. So, for the most part. Well, at least, there you go. You're in it. All right. And this is great because Sun Tzu, everyone knows who Sun Tzu is, right? Master strategist, ancient, but still applicable even today, warfare and business alike, and definitely in the cybersecurity field. But Sun Tzu said, main call, came over my thing here. So Sun Tzu said, to know your enemy, you must become your enemy. And you have to know your enemy in order to defeat him. So being hackers, we have to think, all right, empathizing and understanding with them. If you guys are already hackers in one sense or another, you're halfway there, right? What do they look like? What do they think like? Who do they interact with? Where do they reside? What are they talking about? Why are they talking about that? It's all very, very interesting. What makes their clocks tick? This is what you have to think about. And if you're there already, sure, you have an identity of some sort or another, but you're all established within a community. Now, hopefully you're all on the white hat side of things, or at least gray, at least. But if you are on the black hat side of things, you're a step ahead of the game because you know what's coming for you in the future. But as for now, again, think about that, because even there's a separation between the communities. Sure, there's going to be similarities between white hats and black hats, or even gray hats there too, but you have to think who, what, where, when, how, and why. If I put myself in their shoes, why are they doing what they're doing? What's their purpose, their motive, their tactics, their techniques, their procedures, all of these things? This is what will help us understand them. So let me talk to you a little bit about my team. And yes, those are hunters in the background for all of you Halo fans. My team is comprised of 11 language specialists, and none of which are hackers. I would love to have some hackers on my team. But right now, they're comprised of 11 language specialists. We cover over 16 languages, operate on multiple platforms, and have a current database of over 700 sites. So essentially what we do is we hunt down the sites, locate if you want to use that term. We hunt down the sites and find them, right? So we say, okay, what's going on this site? We have to figure out what's going on. That way we can inform cybersecurity professionals or prospective industries, companies, and tell them ahead of time, look, you're a potential target because this is what's out there right now. That way you are better able to defend whatever it is you're defending before it ever happens. So what we do, we go in, find a site, we gain and maintain access, which is often a lot harder than you think because, as you guys know, you have to have pseudonyms, right? You have usernames, you have handles, you have personalities. You have to get in, you have to talk to them, you have to speak the language. You have to do all of these things. Then you have to maintain it. And you have to do it for, right now, over 700 sites. Not just breaching the service, just barely breaching the service. But we're just getting started. 700, around 1,000, that's maybe 10% right now. Maybe 10%. But we're growing fast because everyone understands the importance of what we're doing. So once we gain access, we analyze the site relevance, mostly based off content. What's on the site? What's going on there? That's how we analyze it. That's how we say, okay, this is relevant or it's not relevant. After that, we assign a priority and we move on. Let me tell you a little bit about that. So here's your basic overview, right? Now, essentially what we've done here is I put it into the intelligence cycle. Now, for those of you who don't know about the intelligence cycle, I'll walk you through it. So in the initial phase, there's planning and direction. You always look at planning and direction. Where am I going? What am I doing? You have to think about that. So that's here prior to us starting to work. The next phase is the collection phase, right? What I just talked about. That's the hunter team. That's here, okay? We collect everything that we're looking at. Then we move on to process and exploitation phase. From here, we take all the information that we've gathered, gain the access, we turn around and we submit it to our scraper team. Our scraper team then takes the data, they parse and crawl through it, segregate it into its relative categories, and enter it into a database, right? Then we move on to the analysis and production phase. From there, once we've got all of our data, we take it and we push it to our front end for development. Our front end then reanalyzes the data and readies it for production or to push it back to the teams. That moves on to dissemination and integration, right? They take that data that we've scraped from those sites and they give it back to the hunter team. They say, look, this is what we found. This is what we're finding. These are the patterns we're seeing, the trends we're recognizing. They take that data and they say, here it is, do what you can with it. We reintegrate it back into our team. The team then takes it for the final phase of reevaluation and says, what have we got and where do we go from here? Which once again completes the full cycle back into the planning and direction phase. And then we go from there. So, where are we looking? I mentioned before multiple platforms. We're on the darknet right now. We're on the clearnet, of course, because there's a number of different countries where it's not a crime to operate on the darknet or the clearnet or whatever they're doing. These activities, these illicit activities, are not illegal wherever they're at. So why do they need to operate there? It doesn't matter. So we're on the darknet, we're on the clearnet, the freenet, which we've just started establishing and running a database for there, backlogging everything. I2P we just started as well. Again, multiple platforms. There's others that we're looking into too. Some of the older protocols, Gopher, Veronica, Arthur, the ones that were competing with the World Wide Web in the beginning. Anywhere that we potentially think that these hackers might be hanging out, might be talking about things, might be planning their next attack, we are. And now on those platforms, we're looking at marketplaces, we're looking at forums, we're looking at chans, blogs, social media, torrents. Everywhere we can be, we are. Sure, we have limited resources right now. Like I said, my team is only comprised of 11 people, but we're everywhere that we can be. So, what are we focusing on? Nothing. No emotion from you. I particularly chose this picture for this slide. I get it, focus, and I guess we missed that one. All right, moving on. So content. We're looking at hacking tools, data leaks, financial fraud, e-commerce, all of this stuff. We're looking at social media distribution as well. What are they doing with all this stuff? And then we look at the relevancy, right? We look at the site itself saying, how old is the site? Has it established a reputation yet? Not only the users, but the site. A lot of times, this is very, very important in a hacker community because reputation, renown, it's how things work there. With the anonymity behind everything, it's how things work. So you say, what's the population is too? How big is the site? What's the maturity? How many people are on the site in relation to how old the site is, right? I have a ton of people in just a few days, probably something going on there. As opposed to if it's been around for a few years and there's only a couple people, maybe we won't pay as much attention to it. Priorities. But again, asking who, what, where, when, how, and why. So, what are we finding? Here you go. Financial fraud and e-commerce, huge, right? In this sense, you look in here, you've got PayPal accounts for sale, Wells Fargo accounts for sale, Bank of America, eBay, Amazon, you name it, right here. They break it down for you too. If you look into it here, you can read it right here. So cash accounts, Emily's checking has $11.21. Not very impressive, but her household checking has $22,000. Maybe you want access to that, right? Moving on. Again, financial fraud and e-commerce. Right here, what we have is carding, specific location for carding. Because you know that if you use a card that's outside of wherever it's registered or wherever you have your address, it's going to throw up an alert, right? It's like when you're in another state and you try and use your card and then it says, hey, are you actually here? And if not, then it's going to shut your card down. So these hackers say, hey, where do you want a card for? You want it for right here in Gilbert, Arizona? We got them. That way it doesn't throw up red flags unless you try to buy a cruise or something like that. Specific sites, locations for carding. Again, here's your fools. For those of you who don't know what fools are, lays it all out. That's not just the CVV and the basic card info. That's everything behind it. Your name, your address, and everything. It's all there. On this side, you've got insider stock trading, right? Now, you have to give information to get information. But think about that. Who has money invested in the stock market? Who thinks it's not corrupt in one sense or another? Insider trading. Huge. It's not easy getting into some of these sites. Some of them we're still working on. Okay? But think about how valuable the information within is. Moving on. Hacking tools, malware, and exploits. Right here, you have a builder for a remote keylogger. Again, here's your description of a keylogger. Since you're all hackers, I won't insult your intelligence. But if you're just getting into it and you want to try it out, which we'll go into later with hacking tutorials, look, this is what a keylogger does. This is what you can do with it. And by the way, we'll build it for you. Here's a multi-exploit builder. Same thing. Look, guys, we're building the weapons. You guys deploy them. Simple as that. Here's your packages, macro builder, silent builder, your silent doc builder. There's the cost, all paid in Bitcoin. Do what you want with it. Here it is. Do what you want with it. Again, right here, you have your exploit builder, another one. Okay? And this one has the relative CVEs for it. Here it is. Here's what it does. By the way, here's where you can use it, too, to cause some serious damage. Do what you want. Here's the prices. Okay? Moving on. Here's a RAT, remote access Trojan, right? Tells you how it what it does and how it can be applied right here. Again, they break it down for you. For those of you who are not very technical, which probably isn't anyone in the room, but myself, I'm not. I have to learn all about this. Every single one of these things I'm learning about. So this type of stuff is extremely useful. Not that I'm going to use it. But how about access to servers? What do you think can be done with that in addition to your malware? Because they sell it right here. These are all examples off of sites we've run into and information that we've extracted. Every single one of these. Of course, we've blocked the sites because that's part of what we have to do, but it's there. Hacking as a service and tutorials. They want to spread the love, so to speak. We're hackers. We want you all to be hackers and hopefully use it in whatever way you see fit. Again, it's a beautiful thing, and it can be used for good. But just like most things, it also can be very, very destructive. And in this sense, most of the time, it's being used destructively. So I've tried to keep most of the slides in English. I didn't presume there would be anyone in here who didn't have their first language as English. But that, again, we cover over 16 languages. This one here, Russian. The next one here, Spanish, but the same thing. These are still hacking as a service tutorials that are all right there for you. Oh, skipped one. Apologize. Data leaks, right? Congressional district files, statewide voter files. Everybody heard about the polling station. So here it is, right? This does happen. It's all right here. They turn around and they dump it. They can do whatever they want with it. Actually, Madison, if you heard about that, is online dating. They released all the information of every user there. Again, here it is. Here's something not so funny. Healthcare insurance database. 9.3 million patients in the United States. Okay, you've also got anyone from Georgia in here? One? Well, see that one up on the right? 397,000. Pretty good chance yours might be there, right? Maybe. So, funny but not funny, especially when we look at HIPAA, right? Ever heard of doctor-patient confidentiality? Well, this takes care of all that and throws it out the window. So, something else to look at. Healthcare has been a huge issue because of the data breaches at hospitals. So let's talk about some of the insights that we've got so far. So far we've seen, with everything that we're collecting, there's an overlap of the markets, the forums, and the vendors. We're seeing a lot of the same users on all three of them, especially in more of our prominent focuses, right? We believe this to be because a lot of hackers hold tight to their user handle, right? It's reputation for them. In a community where no one really knows who you are, okay, or what you've done or what you're going to do for that matter, you have to be known somehow. That's not saying that that's their only handle, right? That's not saying that that's the only person that they are. Of course, they probably have 2, 3, or 4. I don't presume that they're stupid, right? But nonetheless, associating themselves with reputation is extremely important to them. So let's talk about hacker motivation and purpose if we're talking about reputation. So a lot of times what we found is that hackers do the things they do for a couple of reasons. They can do it because it's a challenge, which seems to be a big thing, right? Overcoming obstacles. They get that renown, that reputation from the challenge itself. Financial gain, we've seen a few of these. I didn't even touch on some of the specific attacks for financial gain. Some of the larger bank robberies, if you want to call them that, have been digitally done. Retribution, so revenge or punishment, you can look at those. For instance, Anna Senpai claimed that his attack on Krebs security blog was because of an article he wrote that on a couple of other hackers that got arrested because of the article that he wrote. So you're looking at that there. Or you're looking at the Mariah, which was released by New World Hackers and Anonymous, saying that was in response to WikiLeaks being shut down, or excuse me, restricted during the polls. So another insight that we had was ransomware vendors and markets sell the results of data leakage information. So what this means is everyone in here knows what ransomware is. So we go in, we lock down your computer, right? We say, look, I'll unlock it for a certain price. But in the meantime, what these hackers are doing is once they lock it down, they're turning around and they're saying, look, I'm going to sell you this information. So they're double dipping, right? They're saying, locking it down, I'm going to sell that information. You're going to pay me to get that information back so you can relock it down because it wasn't supposed to be released. But what you don't know is I'm already selling it. So once again, double dipping, right? So when we see ransomware attacks, you can turn around and look and say, hey, I know on these marketplaces, most likely this information is going to be offered up. So again, it helps us key in on who potential players are and who's doing what. Forums. So what we're seeing in forums is that they're hierarchical in structure. right? So we have administrators, we have moderators, and then we have just specific users themselves. There's a lot of social interaction going on in between these forums, and that social interaction carries across to other like forums. So you say, hey, we're on one forum. You can trace those users onto other forums, which helps us key in on specific forums or specific marketplaces for that matter. There's peer ranking and vetting processes. As I mentioned earlier, it's not easy to get into these. Sure, some of them as simply as register and you're in. But if you really want to get to where you're going, which on most forums and most marketplaces, there are private sections. And the private sections, getting into those, most of the time we have no idea what it requires to do to get into there. So you have to embed yourself. And again, thinking like a hacker, right? As hackers, who do we talk to? Who do we make friends with? What are we doing? What are they talking about? How do I get the specific credentials, the passwords, the account names, whatever it is, to do what I need to do to get into the private section? Because it's not simply look it up online. Sometimes you can pay your way in. But even then, there's another layer. It's all about community. So vetting processes, right? Vetting processes and looking for vouchers. That's another thing that they talk about. You have to have vouchers. Not anybody's going to vouch for you. Not anyone's going to vouch for you, especially if they have no idea who you are. So it takes time getting into some of these places. But once you're established within there, again, anonymity plays a big role. If they don't know you're there, they don't know what you're doing, then you're doing the same thing to them that they're doing to us. Markets. So there's multiple vendors selling the same products, okay? Which helps us put more of our focus on those specific products. The marketplaces themselves, anything can be sold. There's actually a lot of excess information that we don't really focus on. Drugs, guns, this type of stuff is not where we're focusing right now. We're focusing on the malicious side of things, the things I talked about before, hacking tools, e-commerce, financial fraud, these things. It's not to say that it doesn't go on, because it definitely does, and it's definitely there. It's not to say that we couldn't help in that area, because we definitely could if that was our focus right now. But again, giving restricted resources and having to have a focus and focus our priorities on certain things, that is not one of them. So the other thing about marketplaces is they're not simple. For the most part, you go in and you say, hey, I want to buy something. Well, in the real world, it's easy because I'm there and you're there. Right? If you decide to sell me something that doesn't work, I can take it back. But when we're working online and you don't know who I am and I don't know who you are, we both know we're using fake names. Right? We don't know who's behind that. I don't know where you live, and I can't return the product, and I'm paying with Bitcoin. It kind of creates a problem. But the markets aren't simple. They're complex. They have escrow services, right? And they're only becoming more and more complex the more that we're seeing it. So they say, look, I don't know who he is, and he doesn't know who I am. But I'll tell you what, because this is my marketplace, and I want it to thrive and succeed, what I'll do is I'll act as the middleman. Okay? You give me the money. He gives you the product. You test the product works, and I turn around and give him the money, right? Just like in the real world. So moving forward, I mentioned the operations just being built. We just started. We noticed the dire bait Trojan. We're seeing it with Mirai, and if you go back and you look at case studies of all these different attacks, you will see that there are gaps from the time that it was deployed and the time that it was actually picked up on the internet. So finding those and being able to say, okay, where do we pick this up and how much time do we have before we're able to defend it? It is extremely important for us. So we're asking who, what, where, when, why, and how. And I've said that 1,000 times, and I'll keep saying it because nobody asked it enough. Why, most importantly? Why? But our plan is to position ourselves in key places and key moments moving forward so we can better inform cybersecurity professionals like yourself and, of course, the industries so that they can better defend. Now, in the grand scheme of things, if we take it all the way back and we look at warfare once again, if you look at the main units on the front line, I'm not going to say they're worthless, but they have no direction without the intelligence, right? They can defend as best possible. They can move in a general direction. But if they have no idea what they're doing or where they're going, then how effective are they going to be? So for cybersecurity professionals, if you don't know what's going on or where the attacks are coming from, if we don't take a proactive approach in addition to what we're doing now, how effective can we actually be? So in order to prevail in our own battlefield, in our own war, the question is, how do we help each other? Right? On one side, we have very talented hackers, white hat hopefully, with a lot of technical skills. On the other side, we have intelligence, the key information needed for you guys to be able to succeed at your jobs, regardless of your skill level. You can be the best hacker there is, and you can be the best at defending whatever it is you're defending. But as I stated when I first started, okay, if the area of operation is too big, it's all about knowing when and where. So, pushing forward, what we have to do, communicate, network, combine intelligence, and of course leverage our technology. That in turn will allow us to prevail in the future. And that's pretty much my presentation. Thanks. Any questions? David.
So you were mentioning that you can purchase it for malware. How do you guys validate that malware is legit and it's not sort of bad as your organization?
So there's a couple of different sites online. Please don't ask me to recall them off the top of my head. We have a resource page for that. Too much information. But there are sites online where you can test the malware to see if it actually works. And a lot of times you're running into, does this work, does it not work? And yes, we do run into that problem of, is it legit or is it not legit? That's one of the issues we have been running into, but that's how we found the sites to test them. So that's one of the ways. Yes. That's a great point. So you got to think, is it really for financial gain or is it for, look, I just want to spread this, I just want to drop it? You got to think, look at Mirai. Look at the weight that it cost, and he didn't charge anything for it, right? Dropped it out there. So you've got that there, but then in addition to that, they turn around and they resell the stuff too. So maybe you drop it for your own purposes, personal purposes, but then the next guy who picks it up turns around and he wants to drop it out there for financial gain. It varies from person to person, from group to group, depending on their purpose. Some use it for different things. You got to think, what's the end goal? So when you say what's the purpose, you got to think, what's the end goal? So I can't specifically say they use it for this, and this is why they charge it, more here rather than they charge it here, or whether it's means versus use. It really just depends. I'm sorry I don't have a straightforward, legit, it's black and white for you, but that's kind of how intelligence works. It's all about consistent, continual analysis. Anyone else? In the back. Okay, well, number one, we're just getting started. This is one of the ways letting you guys know what we're doing, because this is what we noticed. Now, the initial thought was turn around and let the companies know, because it's extremely valuable to them. But in addition to us succeeding at our job, it's important for us to, again, like I said, network and communicate and work together. Because if you look at this, you say, I give you the information, right? Another thing, David, you mentioned earlier, wherever you are, you're talking about, you said, what was your question again? Validating, right. So, sorry, lost it, validating. So that was one of the problems we were having. So like I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, I said, oh, man, it would be nice to have hackers on our team, right? The technical abilities of this, of us being able to say, is this legit or is it not legit? We're just growing. We have 11 people, and most of them are language specialists. We need those types of people. So the information that we feed to you guys, we need the feedback from. That's why we're here. There's no financial gain out of it for us talking to you guys or presenting with you here or working with you here. It's all about networking. It's all about establishing those relationships. How do we help you? And then in return, how do you help me? Yes. So if I don't speak above my head right now, right? Because remember, I am the analyst team lead. I request numerous different people who speak different language and have different skill sets and abilities. Volunteers are always welcome. Because it's a startup company and because we're just beginning, okay, I can't tell you about compensation right now. I have no idea. It's above my head. But I can tell you we would love to have people involved. I know that much right now because I'm hurting in that area. And if I'm hurting in that area, then yes. Get in touch with me, and I'll put you in touch with my boss, and we'll get it done. It's a very simple and easy process. Doesn't take any time at all. One more time. Legitimize the products that they're using? You're talking about the tools? Absolutely. And I'm going to say from my own personal opinion, I think there is. With hackers and their various skills, here's another aspect that, again, this is my own personal opinion here, but you got to think of it this way. If I'm thinking in terms of warfare, right, cyber warfare, there's multiple steps to it. You've got defensive posture, right, like I talked about, reactive. And then again, it's simultaneous where we go out and we gather the information. But on top of that, you've also got one step further, which would be legitimizing the tools and the onsets for that. So let's say that I could say I have my defense right here. This is what I'm defending. And I know that if a malicious hacker is going to come in here, what if I had a payload to give him if he were to try that in return? And that requires the same skills to give back. It is definitely more offensive. There's definitely a place for it. And it's the same type of tactics, but it's used in a different manner, right? It's the same weapons used in a good way. So absolutely, I see a place for it, and I see a way to use that. But again, it's looking at the purpose. Why are they doing what they're doing? That's what it comes down to. I wish I knew. I don't. I'm not gonna pretend like I know right now. I don't. I've been on the ground for a month, and it has been a giant overflow of information. That is very important for us to know, absolutely 100%. In addition to that, it's trying to zero in on specific handlers and people. That comes into the analysis. But again, if you look at it, there's so much data that in addition to us trying to zero in on the big hacking groups, what we also have to do is pay attention to every single exploit or CVE that's put out, make the relationships between those, in addition to who's putting it out and where, whether we know whether they're a part of something or not. Is that in the future? 100% absolutely yes. We want to have insight on them, where they're hanging out, what they're doing, who they're with, who they're comprised of, what are the users. This all goes back into who, what, where, when, why, and how. But again, we're just getting started. This is the end goal. But do we have the means to do it as fast as we want? Not yet. But we're getting there.
Threat intelligence programs complement a security program. But I never, what you are is a threat intelligence company, but I never heard you use the term threat intelligence. Those two terms need to be put together. Is there an intentional reason you didn't use that term?
Not intentionally, no, not on my level. As an analyst team lead, no. Now, Dr. Shakarian, Paul Shakarian, who started up the company, could probably answer that a little bit better. From my perspective, it's mostly about data collections, and I've worked intelligence in there. Intelligence is a crucial aspect of cybersecurity. I don't care what you're saying, whether it's threat intelligence or otherwise. You have to consider it. Why it hasn't been yet, I'm not sure. To a degree, it has in different aspects. But why no one is doing this yet is another thing. You have to think about it. Why has no one said, why are we not stopping them ahead of time? But then again, look at Iraq. How come it took us so long to say, look, we need to be hitting them before they're doing it, as opposed to reacting to it afterwards? War started. You know, the cyber war started. It's been ongoing for a while, and we're just now realizing, look, we're getting hit hard and hit fast, and we don't know how to defend. And not only do we not know how to defend, but we don't have the manpower to do it, even if we did know how to defend. There's over 1 million job vacancies this year alone, and cybersecurity is supposed to grow by 44% in the next 5 years. Next 5 years. But again, just saying, look, we're going to have more people defend the same things in the same way isn't the answer. You know, integrating threat intelligence with cybersecurity. Now we're on to something.
Second question is, threat intelligence has two main pillars. One is human analysts, the other is different types of automated feeds. It sounds like primarily like the company developed that you're working with human analysts. Are you doing, but you did talk about databases and different technical aspects of what you're feeding into as well. Are you automating feeds of any kind that you're thinking about selling, or are you moving in that direction at all?
So yes, absolutely 100%. And I apologize that, again, I am not the person to talk to about the technical side of things. But it takes both, as you mentioned. There are two aspects. It does take both. Our human analysts, as you say, on the ground, we give everything to our scraper team. They parse and crawl through accordingly. That whole system's being built, whether it's building our own onion scraper, setting up our systems to be pushed to a specific database to display so we can help others understand. Again, a big part of it in the end, you got to look at the ignorance of cybersecurity, right? How many people do not understand, myself included on some points, the technical side of things, what needs to be done and what's going on? So when you take the technical aspect and you try to explain to this company and say to them, look, you need to do this and this is why. How hard is that? It's almost like speaking a foreign language to say that to someone when you try to break that down. So I'm sorry I diverted a little bit, but yes, our scraper team is doing a number of different things. If you would like to know more about the technical side of things, we can put you in touch with them as well, and they can break that down for you. I'm sorry I can't answer it. Anyone else? Nothing? Thank you for your time today, guys and ladies. Appreciate it.
It was actually a pretty good presentation. Yeah, so mostly everybody in the room here is offensive security, right? I don't think we have somebody that specifically defense side. So yeah, I kind of we actually haven't introduced or actually brought Darren here to the range. This was his first time, so we kind of had to tell him that we were not defensive guys. Unfortunately, we can go ahead and stop the stream. Do that for the other guys that are online. Just out of